Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about something that I think many of you will find very exciting. We have reason to believe that we are going to be seeing a major upgrade to Nintendo Classics in the not-so-distant future. Nintendo Classics is the new name for Nintendo Switch Online, and it is looking like we are going to be able to play Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS games on at least the Switch 2, possibly the Switch 1, perhaps even next year. And this might even tie into Pokemon's 30th anniversary next year, because there are some big Pokemon games for DS and 3DS, but I also think this could mean just DS and 3DS games in general, like Kid Icarus Uprising, Luigi's Mansion 2 Dark Moon, Super Mario 3D Land, Metroid Prime Hunters, and more. There's actually a decent amount of information here that's supporting this idea. It's not just a credible rumor, which is a big part of it, but also some things that Nintendo has officially filed themselves that is really supporting this idea. So that's what we're diving into this time. So finally, after all the delays from the move, I have a presentable set. And I figured with Metroid Prime 4 coming this December, and us likely getting some news on the game around Halloween, I should probably shoot for a setup that kind of fits those vibes. And thanks to this smart foldable lamp over here from Deck Talk, who is, yes, sponsoring this video, I think I nailed it. Here, check the before, now the after. I think it's made for a world of difference, and this lamp has a variety of color and lighting settings. Yes, it is foldable, you can change it around. I think it's pretty great, so you can check it out with the link in the description below. So there's actually a lot here, but let's first start with the rumor. So the rumor is coming from Special Nick of the Xbox Era podcast. Now, as you see here he was talking about in August about some different things coming down the road from Nintendo. He had heard about the Super Mario Galaxy 2 remaster, which we did see announced during the recent Nintendo Direct, which is what's adding more credibility to what Special Nick hears about here. Now, we haven't heard about the Animal Crossing thing yet, but he didn't promise it would happen soon. And just so you guys know, also earlier in the year, like the beginning of the year, he had heard about all the plans for Switch 2, such as release timing, pricing, the Mario Kart World, launch bundle. That was all correct. So Special Nick has shown throughout this year to be legitimately hearing about some pretty big announcements from Nintendo, and there's something else that he's mentioned he has heard. So here you see the Pokemon Daily Post in the middle of September, like not that long ago, a month ago, said, if Nintendo is able to announce a Virtual Boy for the Switch 2 online, it doesn't seem crazy to me that they would launch a second screen and this would become a reality. So here, Pokemon Daily Post is just theorizing based off a recent Nintendo Direct announcement of Virtual Boy coming to Switch Online. And I agree with the thinking here. If we can see them add like literally a whole Virtual Boy device that you buy, or a cheaper cardboard version so you can play these Virtual Boy games, then that wouldn't be too different for Nintendo adding a second screen so we can play DS and 3DS games. Now that's just speculation based off, I would say, some good common sense. Like, sure, it's absolutely possible Nintendo could pull it off. But Special Nick here is saying, from what I'm hearing, this is basically what we are getting, although not sure on 3DS stuff. So he's saying he is hearing that we're going to be getting something like this. Now he's focusing on DS, not necessarily 3DS. And this is very exciting. It looks like we could be seeing Nintendo DS and possibly Nintendo 3DS coming to Nintendo Classics, but this rumor is more so focusing on DS stuff according to Special Nick. But I'm harping on the 3DS stuff here because I do think there's a little bit more to this. So, if you were paying attention to yesterday's video, we talked about some recent patents that could be hinting at some new mechanics in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. You can check out that video for all that stuff, but it was coming from some interesting patent information. And we now have more patents that are supporting this recent rumor. Now, if you didn't see yesterday's video or you're unaware of how patents work, yes, patents oftentimes do hint at what Nintendo is working on, and so sometimes these patents are insight as to what we'll see get announced in the future. Not always, but many times yes, such as when we saw patents for Nintendo working on Joy-Cons with magnetism. What happened? We got the Switch 2 with Joy-Cons that connect magnetically. Or, as we also talked about yesterday, they had pads for different things in Zelda with using different animations in the air, and we saw those animations in Tears of the Kingdom. So yes, we do have history of pads actually amounting to something here. So keep in mind, this rumor from Special Nick was back in September, right? These pads have come out in this month of October. And shoutouts to Mike Odyssey, who pointed out some of these pads that just came out today. But we have imagery here showing Nintendo working on different ways to display certain images. This is showing like a second image map, but let me scroll through, you'll see a little bit more to kind of explain my point. There's a first image, and then there's a second image, right? Well, if we're talking about dual screen stuff, there may be something to this idea. There's a single screen mode, and you have the option to switch between the first and second screen. And there's even also a depiction of showing the second image on top of the first image here. So there's several different viewing modes. This could be something that Nintendo is cooking up to find ways to be able to play Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS on your Switch 2 and or possibly your Switch 1. But you may see this stuff and think that it's not really that big of a deal, that it could just be something else completely random that's about switching screens and not necessarily for DS and 3DS. And maybe that's the case. However, 2 days ago, there was another patent that came out that I find very interesting. What does that look like to you? Here, let me zoom in just a little bit more, just to make it more painfully obvious. That's a Nintendo 3DS. They here are working on putting out new patents talking about working with 3DS technology or using 2 different screens to create a certain image for this top part here. Why might they be working on something like this? Maybe because, well, they are planning something for the 3DS in the future as well, which is why I was harping on this idea of not just Nintendo DS, but also maybe Nintendo 3DS when I was talking about the rumor. We have these patents supporting the idea that Nintendo is researching and developing technology to showcase dual screen gameplay from both Nintendo DS and 3DS games for at least the Switch 2. Now, I keep saying at least the Switch 2. I'm saying that because obviously Nintendo is going to support the Switch 2 as best they can. There are a lot of things that are not coming to Switch 1, but there are still some things that are, and perhaps something like this they would still feel is worthwhile to coming to Switch 1. It could absolutely run on the console, that's not the issue. It's more so Nintendo deciding if it's a worthwhile feature. Although, I say that from the perspective of being able to run Nintendo DS and 3DS games from a graphical power perspective. Obviously, the Switch is more powerful than those consoles by a significant margin. But does the Switch have the same level of setup to be able to attach a second screen? And that I'm unsure of. The Switch 2 has 2 USB-C ports on both sides. I imagine they would use the top USB-C port to place that second screen, although maybe they can still find a way to attach it to the bottom, because the Switch 1 only has the bottom USB-C port. Although I'm sure there's a way to design it so where you can still plug it in to either side, like if there's a cable and it can still attach to the top part, like that could still work. And I imagine that this second screen that they may be working on would be attached at the top and not the bottom, because the bottom is already a touchscreen, which is what you would need to use touchscreen technology for DS and 3DS games. Now, if you've managed to get this far into the video, let me take this moment to point out that I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your support, and I would also like to thank all my returning subscribers for sticking around all this time. I appreciate you. So we have a rumor from Special Nick, who has shown to have pretty good credibility, and he's indicating that at least something DS is coming. And we also now have multiple patents showing that Nintendo is working on this kind of technology. Why else would Nintendo be filing patents now for Nintendo DS and 3DS stuff? It seems like it would be odd, wouldn't it? Now, something else I think is worth mentioning, there were some conversations a few months ago about different Metroid games coming to modern Nintendo platforms, because we saw things like Metroid Prime Hunters get a new trademark filing. Now, when Nintendo files for trademarks, this does not mean necessarily that they're going to release a new version of the game. It just shows that they are keeping the trademark secure for whatever reason, perhaps down the road. Like, they want to keep that option open. But given that they have filed a trademark, it shows that Nintendo's at least somewhat interested in keeping the option open to maintain the Metroid Prime Hunters trademark, possibly suggesting that it could come in perhaps a Nintendo DS Classics. Maybe. We have also heard from Nash Weedle, so yes, this is a rumor, take it with a grain of salt, that every Metroid Prime game is on the way. And that would include Metroid Prime Hunters for Nintendo DS, Metroid Prime Pinball for Nintendo DS, and also Metroid Prime Federation Force for 3DS. If we're getting DS and 3DS Classics, then there would be opportunity to add all these games to the platform. And so maybe in regards to that rumor, We're gonna get Metroid Prime 2 and 3, perhaps right before Prime 4 comes out, in a few weeks maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then next year, we see the launch of at least Nintendo DS Classics, and we see things like Metroid Prime Pinball and Prime Hunters, and then perhaps later down the road, they also add 3DS. I think it's pretty unlikely that Nintendo would add both DS and 3DS at the same time. Now, on the note of Pokemon's 30th anniversary, that is next year, and we've been waiting on a variety of Pokemon games to be added to the eShop in some way. They had them for 3DS, we don't have access to them. It would be really great if finally, for the 30th anniversary, they start to add some of these games to the eShop in some form, be it through Nintendo Classics or as separate purchases. And if Nintendo is looking to be adding second screen technology here to allow DS and 3DS games, then they can also add the DS Pokemon games and the 3DS Pokemon games as well. So there's a lot of interesting potential here. When does this all happen? I think there's a decent chance at least one of these happens next year. Like, I think we could see the announcement for Nintendo DS Classics, especially when accounting for Pokemon's 30th anniversary. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.